go ahead and get started here. Hopefully everyone can hear me all right in the back. If you can't, at any point during the presentation, just may raise your hand and let me know. And I'll try and speak a little louder. First of all, thanks everyone for attending. This is a great turnout, fantastic. Met our expectations and exceeded those. So thank you for taking some time tonight for this public meeting. First off, my name is John Wiggin. I'm the consultant project manager of the HDR. Have about a 20-minute or so presentation to kind of introduce the study, talk a little bit about transportation needs on the corridor, and really what we're looking to answer here through this corridor study. Before we begin, just a couple quick housekeeping items. If you did not sign in when you came in, please sign in. If you leave your contact information too, we'll make sure to put you on the list so you're notified of whenever we update the website, as well as notifications for upcoming public meetings. So we'll just, good way for us to reach out to you and let you know when there's any changes or progress on the study, so you're aware as we move through the entire study. Second item, if you didn't get a comment card or a handout, please grab those. If you'd like one here and you don't have one, just raise your hand and someone from the study team will bring you those. I want to let you know there's a study website, and this is where we'll be providing all the updates as we move through the study. When we get into developing concepts and layouts and those sorts of things, those will eventually get posted on the website. All the information that you see here with the display boards, the presentation, the informational handout will all be posted to the website probably within about a week. Hopefully we'll get that up before the 4th of July weekend. We're also taking a crack at recording the presentation, so hopefully there'll be a recording of the presentation up there on the website as well for anybody that wasn't able to attend tonight. Tonight's meeting, the format is that we have here a 20-minute presentation to introduce the study. From that point, we'll break into open house. There's a lot of representatives from the study team here, so please reach out and discuss any questions, leave comments with them. We will not have a formal question and answer. We'll just go straight to the open house following the presentation. In line with that, there are various methods to provide feedback and leave comments. One of those is the comment card. You can leave that, drop it in the box before you leave by the door. You can also mail them to me. There's an address on the back. You can also go on our website. There's a contact location down towards the bottom. Leave any comments, questions, those go directly to me. You can also send myself an email, phone call, or also the DOT's project manager, Steve Graham. You'll see his contact information up here a little bit as well. So feel free, at any time throughout the study, you have questions, comments, please get a hold of us. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really threefold. The first one, which will be about the first half of the presentation, will be an introduction of the study. Second one is that we'd like to discuss some of the transportation needs that we see along the corridor, really what's driving this study and what we're looking to accomplish. We've also conducted a little bit of preliminary analysis in terms of traffic analysis and looking at the crash history along the corridor, so I have a few slides to share some of that information. And then that gets us to the third objective of today's meeting, and that's gathering feedback from all of you. So again, please, if there's things that we need to be studying that you see out there on a daily basis, please let us know to make sure that gets included here in the study. So study team, study contacts myself, John Wiggin, and Steve Graham with the South Dakota Department of Transportation. There's a study advisory team that the DOT put together at the onset of the study, and that involves representatives from the South Dakota Department of Transportation, really from throughout the state. There's also representation from Federal Highway Administration, City of Brookings, and City of Volga. And then South Dakota Department of Transportation hired HDR, which I'm with, and there's several others from HDR here tonight, and we'll be the ones doing the analysis, developing the concepts to deliver this study. So the study area, what are we looking at? So it is the US 14 bypass corridor. From the west end, from the northwest of the US 81 intersection, kind of at the start of that horizontal curve, extending eastward to the US 14B and 14 intersection on the west side of Brookings. From there it extends along the bypass, over to the east side of Brookings, and you have that bypass and US 14 intersection east there. I want to make this clear, this study is not looking at US 14 or 6th Street through Brookings. We're strictly looking at the bypass on the east and north side of Brookings, and then US 14 west through the US 81 intersection. So study goals, the overarching goal of this study is to develop a long-range plan for the US 14 bypass corridor. Key components of that include the 22nd Avenue intersection with the US 14 bypass, I-29 US 14 bypass interchange, as well as looking at the corridor number of lanes and access points throughout the entire corridor. And what this means is, if there are locations where we need to go from 3-lane to 4-lane, or west of Volga, do we need to go to 2-lane or 3-lane, potentially passing lanes or 4-lane. At intersections, we're looking at turn lanes and those sorts of things. So that's what we mean. Really throughout the entire corridor, we're looking at the number of lanes that are needed, at intersections or segments. The final component is the environmental overview. That as we develop these concepts, that we'll also be looking at potential environmental impacts with these concepts. It helps us, not only understand the risks with those concepts or alternatives, but also can help us, and eventually with screening, that when some of these recommendations do move forward to a project, we have a good idea what the environmental impacts will be when we do the environmental analysis later on down the road. So one thing I do want to make clear with this study, that ultimately we'll be developing recommendations, that there is no construction plans, no design plans as part of this study, that recommendations for what the DOT can take to the next step, and that's when you get into the construction environmental review. That's what the purpose of this study is, and that's what the deliverables will be at the end of the study. So looking at the schedule, there's 6 main phases for the study. We started right at the beginning of April, and we hope to conclude kind of the June 2020 timeframe. Right now, we are still in the first phase, and that is developing the transportation needs, or understanding the transportation needs throughout the corridor. And we do that through looking at the crash history, looking at traffic history, forecasting out traffic to future years. And then this public involvement and stakeholder meetings that we have here over the next couple days, all that feeds into helping us deliver or identify what the needs are that we need to be looking at as part of the study. At the conclusion of this public meeting, after a couple weeks, we transition and develop the concepts. And that's where we take all the information and we start to look at what we, what potential concepts can be developed, really to address those needs throughout the entire corridor. We'll have a bit of preliminary evaluation along with that, and that's when we come back for the second public meeting and stakeholder meetings. So the next meeting that we'll have, we're kind of in that September, October timeframe. That's when we come back with concepts. We'll have preliminary evaluation and looking for your feedback on those items. From that point, we take the information that you all provided, and we go back and we determine, analyze, and refine scenarios. And this is where we start to screen things down, much more manageable set of scenarios, and we can do additional analysis, further refinement. And that gets us into developing those preliminary recommendations. And that's when we come back for the third public meeting. So we'll have the refined scenarios for improvements throughout the corridor. We'll have preliminary recommendations. We'll be seeking your feedback at that point. And that gets us in the last 2 phases, and that's really where we get into the development of the report, revising the report, finalizing recommendations, those sorts of things after that third public meeting. And the goal would be to have all that information submitted to the DOT kind of that June 2020 timeframe. So one thing I wanted to touch on here with future study area projects and how those fall within this study. One thing that you may not be aware of, that there is a DOT project in progress at the US 14 bypass and 22nd Avenue intersection. And they are looking to construct a temporary signal and add a northbound right turn lane. And they're hoping that that project can come to fruition here late 2019 or possibly might slip into 2020. So that's coming shortly. That's the short-term solution at that intersection. Where the study comes in is we're looking at the bigger need, the long-term need at that intersection. And the DOT has identified that the first project that would be likely come out of this study would be at that 22nd Avenue US 14 bypass intersection. And they have that planned for fiscal year 2024. So that kind of gives you an idea of the time frame of these longer range improvements, when those may start here throughout the corridor. Also want to point out that there is a project currently in the early stages of designs at the US 14, US 81 intersection, and through those horizontal curves. They're bringing the curves, the lanes in closer together, improving some side angles, and that's in currently preliminary design, very early stages. And that project is planned kind of 2023 to 2026 timeframe. And one other thing I want to point out, that there was a recent study of 22nd Avenue in Brookings that was led by the city of Brookings, and that will be something that they have recommendations there towards the north end of the corridor and tying into US 14 bypass, that we'll be coordinating with that study to make sure that that is accounted for, and if there's anything that needs to be passed back, to the city for their projects in the future, that those are coordinated together.
Isn't that 22nd Avenue start this summer or in the summer?
There's multiple phases. So this one on the north end is what they've identified as their final phase, and that's several years out. So with that, I want to transition over to kind of the transportation needs discussion. And this is where we start to, look for the input from you all to help us fill in any of the gaps. And what do I mean by transportation needs? I have a list here. I'm not going to go through all these, but these are several of the items that we're looking at here as part of the study. Things pertinent to Volga. One of those is bicycle pedestrian facilities and potential crossings of US 14. Been some comments about some of the difficulties sometimes crossing US 14. As Volga continues to grow, we certainly don't want US 14 to be a bypass or be a barrier between routes north and south of the highway. So that's something that we'll be looking at, those crossing locations and what those potential treatments are through there. Another thing, I mentioned earlier, turn lanes, that we'll be looking throughout the corridor, looking at potential need for future turn lanes at the intersections. Traffic signals is another item. We'll be looking at signal warrants, various intersections throughout the corridor, whether the signals are needed in the short term or long term, that we hopefully will have an idea from DOT on when signals are likely going to be needed for traffic operations and safety in the future. And one other item I want to touch on too, as we're looking at existing infrastructure. And what there's in the top right is the structure over I-29 at the 133 interchange. And one of those, when we're looking at potential projects that we are coordinating with, a lot of times the expected life expectancy of some of these structures or concrete, pavement that's out there, that we're not, it's not necessarily that we're going through and bulldoze everything out, that we want to make sure we maximize useful life of a lot of this infrastructure. So that goes into the coordination of timing of when some of these improvements will be implemented. So, looking at that previous needs list, a lot of the items we're looking at are related to traffic and safety. So the next few slides, I want to touch on a couple of the traffic items and some of the preliminary analysis we've conducted for both the traffic volumes and crash history. The first one here at the daily traffic volumes. We did quite an extensive data collection of intersection train limit counts, segment counts here in the spring of 2019, and that's what created the volumes up there that you see up there in the black. Those are daily volumes that would be expected kind of in that peak season time frame. We'll be looking at the summer months, and those are the volumes that are currently out there based on the information that we collected. We also forecasted volumes out to what we're calling year 2050, which is essentially looking, at assuming a certain growth, what those volumes would be 25, 30, 35 years from now. And in the year 2050, using growth rates developed for the study, that you can see what volumes might be expected, on that annual growth. So what that really equates to, throughout the corridor, it's kind of that consistent 35 to 50% growth over the next, 31 years. That equates to about 1% to 1.5% annually when you're kind of looking at that straight line. So one of the things I do want to point out is over on the bypass side of things, that, one thing we look at in terms of, this kind of upper level threshold of expected capacity of a 3-lane section, which I mean, is 1 lane in each direction plus center turn lanes, which is out there right now. That capacity range is at 12 to 16,000 vehicles per day. And a lot of that is dependent on number of access locations, as well as signalized intersections, really anything that creates turbulence in the flow, and that reduces capacity. So as you can see there at the 2050 volumes, approaching 15,000 vehicles per day, that's potentially right up there at that upper limit of what a 3-lane capacity or a 3-lane roadway would have for an expected capacity. Even looking at the existing conditions, 10,800, that potentially given the situation and what future recommendations may be along that corridor, that as well could be approaching future capacity of 3-lane. So that's something that we'll certainly be looking through the bypass area is the number of lanes here into the future. Not only at the 22nd Avenue intersection, the interchange, but really all the intersections through that stretch. So another thing we look at with traffic is looking at peak hour traffic operations. And typically we'll look at the AM or morning commute, which is usually one direction, and then you have the PM, the afternoon commute, which is often back the other way. And looking at those operations, both existing conditions in 2019 volumes as well as 2050 volumes, these are kind of the general, what we see. But there is a board in the back that you can look at if you have additional questions on this. But the top one there, probably pretty obvious, the one that uses the 22nd Avenue intersection on US 14 bypass, that it's already experiencing some operational and safety issues there during certain times of the day, certain times of the year. Without any adjustment, there is a planned adjustment, but you'd expect that to continue to degrade. There's a lot of stop controlled intersections along this corridor, and it's, certainly as volumes increase along US 14 bypass, the delays are certainly going to get longer from those stop controlled intersections. So that's something that we'll be taking a look at. And sometimes that gets to that point where you're looking at signalizing intersections. Another item there, US 14 bypass, those segments near capacity, kind of what I alluded to before with the 3-lane capacity needs. And then one thing here related to Volga is the US 14 Caspian intersection, that northbound approach. That as we see Volga continue to grow, especially the residential areas to the south of US 14, south railroad tracks, that Caspian intersection, especially in the AM, we have northbound people turning right, heading to Brookings for work. Those volumes will continue to grow. And being that it's a single lane approach right now, as those volumes continue to grow, you're going to start to see some operational issues, some delay, into the future. So that will be something that we'll be taking a closer look at as well. So the next few slides is related to crash history along the corridor. And typically we look at the most recent 5 complete years of crash data for these studies. In this case, it's 2014 to 2018. So looking at the entire corridor as a whole, that's what this slide kind of focuses on. You can see on the crashes per year there in the chart. And then, looking at it, in terms of totals, there are 288 crashes over those 5 years along the corridor. 80 of those were intersection, 208 were segments. One thing to note, there were 12 fatal or serious injury crashes, and really, there's a few, kind of spot locations that there's a couple that occurred, but really those were present throughout the entire corridor. Of those 288 crashes, 40% occurred in that November to January timeframe, which was, to an extent to be expected. That's when you have those first winter storms in the November month. That's where you also have more people driving in the dark. You also have a lot of people coming to and from Brookings. There's a lot of events, those occurring in the dark as well, inclement weather conditions, just a lot of things combining why we see those number of crashes there in those 3 months. Again, of those 288 crashes, 47% were vehicle-able crashes. So what does that equate to? That, probably just over 150 of those 288 crashes were single vehicle or multi-vehicle that didn't include a vehicle, or include an animal in the crash. And then speaking of that night crash, 48% of all crashes on this corridor occurred at night, which is a fairly high number. So with the crash history from there, looking at the big picture corridor, narrow it in, we look at a few segments and locations. Just want to point out to you. Well, the first one is US 14 and 81 intersection. In those 5 years, there were 7 total crashes. 6 of those were angles. 1 resulted in fatality, and another one serious injury. 4 involved northbound and eastbound vehicles. So that's northbound US 81 traffic, which is left, and eastbound US 14/81 traffic heading to Volga. Through the horizontal curve, there's additional crashes up there that you can see. There were 9 crashes through that horizontal curve, but 6 of those were vehicle-animal crashes, and there were 0 injury crashes too. So, just for your reference on what the circles mean up there, so they're broken out by injury severity. The red is a fatal crash. Orange is a serious injury crash. Yellow is a what we call non-incapacitating crash, which is an injury crash but not as serious as a serious injury. Blue is a possible injury crash. The light green is a no injury crash. And then the dark green is a vehicle-animal crash. The next location I'll point out is the segment here between 458th Avenue and 459th Avenue. And this, looking at other similar segments throughout the corridor, this one stood out as a high crash location. That just on the segment, not counting the intersections, there are 13 total segment crashes through here. 203 fatalities, 1 injury. Of those 13 crashes, 5 involved crossing the center line. And that's where you really get those serious head-on type collisions. And those occurred five times through this location. Sometimes I hit a vehicle, sometimes ended up in the opposite ditch, but there's always that potential of hitting that vehicle in the opposite direction. Looking at the intersections on either side of that segment, the 5 crashes combined for those 2 intersections, 3 angle, 2 rear end. One other thing I want to point out at this location is 6 of those 18 crashes noted snow, ice, or slush on the roadway, and thus, it's winter weather contributing those crashes. And one of the meetings we had earlier today, a lot of issues with just overdriving conditions, especially out here west of Brookings and west of Volga. So another segment I want to point out here is US 14 between Volga and Brookings. Between 466th Avenue and US 14B, there were 75 total crashes. But in terms of when you look at a crash rate, which is the crashes per, really per vehicles driving through this corridor, that the crash rate was not very high, because this is the highest volume segment here, really within the study area. So, in terms of crash rate, this area didn't really stand out, especially when you look at 42 of those 75 crashes were vehicle-animal crashes. You really see that concentration of the dark green circles there, especially on that west end towards the Volga side of things. But looking, sorting through the data a little bit further, that there were, of those 75 total crashes, there were 10 injury crashes in this segment. And the thing that really stood out with that is that the most serious injury crashes, that's when we're talking about the fatal crash, the serious injury crashes, those sorts of things, that those were rear end crashes on this area. And that's something too, that, along this segment, looking at turn lanes, looking at advanced warning, the railroad crossing, just that speed differential, turning trucks, halfway through the segment, all those things contributing are things that we'll be looking at. One other item I want to point out there on the east side, the US 14 bypass, that westbound kind of flyover that then comes into US 14. There were 6 crashes there at that location. All were rear end crashes, no injuries, which is a good thing. So that is something too that we'll be looking at, how to maybe just looking at that approach here into the future and seeing if there's anything that can be addressed to, or done to address those rear-end crashes. And then one other location I want to point out, and that's here through the bypass segment. And through, this segment, we do see a lot of angle crashes, a lot of rear-end crashes. And those are pretty common through those intersections. I know if they're on the left, you can see what those total crashes are at those intersections. The one I do want to talk about here a little bit is US 14 bypass and 22nd Avenue intersection. And that saw 11 crashes over the 5 years of data. 5 of those result in injury crashes, there are 8 angle crashes. And that's something we've heard, several times here over the last couple months, is just the issues with sight, especially when you have trucks heading eastbound, turning right to head southbound, blocking the view of people at the stop control approach. Also just people getting impatient and misjudging gaps and those sorts of things. So hopefully, with the short-term improvements and the longer range improvements, that we can look to address some of those crashes at that intersection. A lot of those methods can be applied to the other intersections throughout the corridor as well.
Sir, real quick, on the bypass, you just, that nice picture there, are you guys looking at making that a continuous lane to go on 214? Because, no offense, but anybody that lives here suffers road rage every time they try to turn right onto Highway 14.
Yeah.
So if somebody's coming in the slow lane, they're not from here, they don't know they're supposed to get over.
Yeah, certainly that can be a consideration, yeah. So that kind of concludes the transportation needs piece that I have for tonight's presentation. From this point forward, the next steps up there, that we'll be compiling all the feedback we received from tonight's public meeting, tomorrow night's public meeting, and stakeholder meetings, as well as anything else we get here in the next 2 weeks. We do have additional analysis to complete, so all that'll filter in, before we transition into development of concepts. And that's where we get to the next few months, and that's where we're developing the concepts. We're working with the study team to look to address the issues and needs we see along the corridor. And at that point, we'll be coming back here fall 2019, kind of that September, October timeframe, and presenting those concepts to you for your feedback. So with that, we'll conclude the presentation. We'll break out to open house. Like I said, there's a lot of people from the DOT here to answer any questions, discussion on those items. We do ask that if you can provide your comments or anything, any feedback on tonight's meeting, if you could get us those by July 12th, 2019. That allows us to transition into that next phase of the study. Again, study website there, study contacts, comments can certainly go to myself or Steve Graham with the DOT. So, guys, with that, I'd just like to thank everyone for attending and appreciate your time. So, thank you.